acknowledgement of country. So I acknowledge that the traditional owners of the land are the First Nations people, and I am in Camperdown, so I am in Jugged Wurrung land. Sorry, I probably am always pronouncing it wrong, but yeah, just want to acknowledge that the traditional custodians of the land were the first people on this land. But thank you very much, Lucinda. I will hand over to you.
Yes, my pleasure. Thank you again for having me here, and thanks for those of you who have joined us. I'm wondering if perhaps it's a good idea for people to mute unless they're asking questions. It might be good just for the recording. Today we're doing a bit of a, or tonight, we're doing a bit of a deep dive into draft sealing. So hopefully you'll get a good idea of some of the things you'll be able to do in your homes throughout this. I think you've possibly all met me, or Kathy. I'm trying to think if Kathy was here at the other one. Anyway, I'm Lucinda. I do energy efficiency assessing and training and presenting. I'll sort of, not talk that much about myself because you already know me, I think. Tonight we're going to be talking about draft sealing and why, first of all, why does it matter? What difference does it make? The common drafts that you'll find around your home and how to seal them. So we'll just go through them sort of step by step and look at the draft and what you might do. Then we'll talk a little bit about drafts versus condensation, because often people will say, but if I seal up those drafts, aren't I going to get moisture and that sort of thing? So it is important to look into that. And then we'll talk about a few next steps and where you might go from here. So first of all, why do drafts matter? There's two reasons. One is that you're, with all of the little gaps and cracks in your home added up, you're literally losing and gaining air, losing air to the outside, gaining air from the outside in quite large quantities sometimes. And it is said that for the typical house in Victoria, if you add up all of the little gaps and cracks, it's like having a metre square window open day and night. So even though they seem small, they're actually really making a big difference to our comfort. Not only that, but we're continually reheating and recooling air in summer and winter to try and make it comfortable for ourselves. And the other reason is that drafts just feel cold. So even if you're in a room that's relatively warm, if you've got a cold draft on you, you're going to feel cold all over, and that makes you turn up the temperature on the thermostat, which then costs you more energy. So it's about comfort and energy costs. So the two things that you want to do with draft sealing is blocking external gaps in the home, and that can account for 25% of air leakage in winter and 15% of the hot air gain in summer. So it's pretty significant. But the other part of it is blocking gaps, or not blocking gaps, but more separating out areas inside the home that might be a problem. And your home might not be like this, but it's quite common, especially in older houses, that you might have just a really drafty area, such as or what I see all the time is older houses where they might have had, the original porch has been built into a room and it's got louvered windows and vented windows and just, doors that don't fit that well. And often those built-in porches are also very poorly insulated, sometimes not at all. They've just got a little flat roof with metal. So if you've got areas of the home that are a problem, you can also zone them out or draft proof them by either zoning, which we'll look at it in a minute, or draft sealing the door to the area. So with zoning, it feels a little bit like it's not draft proofing, but it is about us managing the movement of air. So I'm including it anyway, and it's about reducing the movement of air within internal areas. You've probably seen some of these pictures because I put them in a range of my presentations, but these are just people's DIY versions of draft sealing. I'm just going to get a little pointer pen here. This one I saw on the My Efficient Electric Home Facebook page, if anyone's heard of that. And it was someone who had the problem where they have upstairs and downstairs. The heater's on downstairs, but all the heat's moving upstairs. So they got these secondhand curtains from the op shop and just attached them to the roof. I think they did it with Velcro, and that you can see there's bulldog clips even on there. So it's maybe not pretty, but it's doing a good job of separating out the space. And this one was another client's house where they put this curtain in between two large areas, and it halved the amount of space that their air conditioner was trying to condition. This is a couple more examples, another one with a staircase and another one just with a lightweight curtain. And even a lightweight curtain will help stop that airflow. Now, with all the other kinds of draft proofing, the kinds that we're normally talking about is when there's a gap in building materials that's allowing air to flow through. And this seems really obvious, but to draft proof, what you've got to always look back on is that it physically blocks the air movement. The reason I mention that is because there's been a bunch of draft ceiling products available under the Victorian Energy Upgrade Scheme, which is where people might have had things done by door knockers. And they will install draft ceiling products, but the point I'm trying to make is if you don't check that the product is actually sealing the draft, then it's less than useful. This is whenever I'm in a home, if there's chimneys, I look in them, and I've seen so many of these free chimney seals that are like this, where you can just literally see massive gaps around the side. That is not sealing the chimney, but it's been classed as a draft sealing job done. So anyway, it seems obvious, but whenever you install something, no matter what it is, it's important to go back and make sure it really has sealed the gap. There are drafts all around our houses, walls, floors, ceilings, everywhere, and they can be in new houses and old houses. Definitely the older the house you have, it's more likely to have more drafts, both because the house might have moved, but also built-in drafts that were sort of designed to be there, like wall vents and things. The newer the home, there should be less things that are built into it. And for example, if you've got a brand new home, then the requirement is for exhaust fans to be self-sealing, which never was the case before. But anything that's not very new, not very new build is going to have a whole lot of drafts, and we're going to go through them tonight. This chart I really like because it gives you a visual view of what's happening in terms of air leakage, and it's showing the cubic meters of air leakage per hour caused by different air leakage sites. So if you look at the very bottom, this is the chimney, and that's about 640 cubic meters of air leakage per hour through that chimney, which is just phenomenal, don't you think, from one open chimney? Part of the reason for that is because they are a hole, but they're also designed to suck air out. So they're sort of a supercharged hole, if you know what I mean. And that's why it's so important to fix them up. This large gap one would be more to do with, permanently open louver windows and things like that. The evaporative cooler vents, they're the third biggest one, even though they're a lot less than these other, but it's still significant. And then if you're in a 70s home that has 2 wall vents in every room, which is very common, you've probably got 12 wall vents, and you've still got 130 cubic meters of air leakage per hour just because of those wall vents. So that's a really useful chart to look back on, and you'll be getting a copy of these slides. You'll be able to have a look yourselves. Let's talk a little bit about finding drafts. To me, the simplest ways are often the best, and that's just by physically feeling them, seeing them, or using an incense stick or a candle, and especially on a cold, windy day, just walk around and see where the smoke's going. That's also useful for chimneys. If it's a a windy day and you go in front of a chimney with an incense stick, you'll see that it's drawing that smoke up. If you're able to borrow a thermal camera from the energy kits from the library, first of all, you need to get to know it a little bit. So it's a color-based system, and the way they work is showing they show differences in heat and cold in an area. The warm is always shown by yellow, orange. The cool is shown by bluey, purpley. But the thing about them is that the moment you get something that is very cold or very warm, it changes the ratio of the colors around it. So you can see how this guy, he's showing up very warm because he's a body, and it makes all of the space around him look cold by comparison. But if he wasn't there, you might actually see a different picture. So it's a little bit, you've got to play around a bit to get the hang of what they're showing. And if you can, avoid having something that's very hot or very cold in it. Like if you did it over a heater, it's going to look like the heater's boiling and everything else is cold, which isn't necessarily accurate. Then what you need to do is set up your home to get the best result. And what that requires is to have the biggest difference between outside and inside temperatures that you can get. One way to do that is by depressurizing your home. And the way you would do that is on a cold morning, put on the heaters full blast for an hour or so everything inside's really warm. Then turn on all of the exhaust fans and range hoods in the house, and that will create a lack of pressure, which then draws drafts in through any gaps and cracks in the house. And that will then give you a good picture of where those drafts are coming from. You can also do it the opposite, where you pressurize the house, but then you have to look from outside, which I think is a bit trickier. So I reckon this is the easiest way to do it. Let's talk through a few draft sealing jobs. And I'm starting with doors and windows, mainly because they're the most obvious thing to most of us. But in my opinion, they're some of the more difficult things to draft seal, because whereas a gap in a skirting board or something is just a gap, and once you've filled it, it's filled. A door and a window have opening parts and catches and latches, and they need to lock, and they're just a lot more complicated. You can have them, as I've listed here, how does it open? Is it in or out? Is there a step? Does it go up or down? What is it onto, carpet or timber? So there's a whole stack of things you need to know. And first of all, the idea would be to have a good look at it and see what you're going to need in order to get a seal around those areas. I'll talk through some of the common seals for doors and windows, but what I also recommend is looking online for some YouTube videos on specific draft proofing jobs. And one good place you can get them is if you go to the EcoMaster store, that's EcoMaster. They have videos that are just free for anyone to look at for a whole range of draft sealing jobs. They do sell the products as well, but you can look at the videos just to get a picture. And for example, they'll have a door section, and then they'll have different kinds of doors, French doors, bifold doors, standard opening doors, and then they'll list which product works for certain kinds of things, like if there's a step up or if it's onto carpet, for example. So that's what you need to do. First of all, figure out what your situation is and then work out what's going to match it. The other drafts aren't this complicated, I promise. But we'll just talk about these because they're the ones that everyone sees. Door bottom seals. So each door needs to have bottom seals and then what we call perimeter seals, which go up the sides and over the top. If you are getting one of the free seals under the VEU scheme, or you might have already had them, you've most likely had one of these plastic stick-on seals. They're very cheap and very unreliable because you really need to clean the door really well before you stick them on for them to stay. And so they fall off quite a bit, but also because they're a solid piece of plastic, if there's any unevenness in the floor that they're going up against, it's going to push them off. What you can do if you have them already, you could try and screw them onto the bottom of the door frame, and that way you may get a functional seal out of it. If you don't, then a door bottom brush seal, this one, is not a bad idea, and they're a lot more flexible to little changes in the depth of the tread or changes in the gap because they're brushes. And so they're little, they just mold better around what's going on, but they're not for over carpet. You can also get a very big range of sizes from small gaps to really big gaps. You can get super long brushes. So if you have a massive gap, that might be what you're going to need to do. This top one, the RP3 automatic drop-down seal, is, I think, one of the best suited for an external door that is open to the elements, because it keeps away rain and wind. The way they work, they're on an angle, and there's a little round, what's called a camshaft on the door frame. When the door closes, it hits up onto that camshaft and it pushes that seal down, which gives it a really good draft proofing effect. But while it's not being pushed down, it's actually quite high, so it can go over treads and all sorts of things. So that's a really good one. But it is for a gap less than 16 millimeters, so it won't work for everything. The roller seal, I've actually very rarely seen one of these, but it is an option for doors that open onto carpet. So yeah, carpet can cause some trouble with other kinds of seals because they catch on the carpet, whereas this one just rolls over it. Now, with the perimeter seals, the cheap seals are either foam or rubber from a hardware store. So that's this sort of thing that you get in a roll. Now, they can work fine. If you've got very even gaps where your doors or windows close, then they're perfectly fine. The trouble that you can come up against with them is that because they have a certain thickness, you can buy different thicknesses, but usually the gaps in your doors and windows aren't going to be just one thickness. They're probably going to be 6 different thicknesses. So you can either go and, cut little bits and try and get it right, or you can use this sort of product. This is called a V-seal. The reason that can work better is because it still has a self-adhesive side. So it's still cheap, and you buy it in a roll and you can put it on. But when that V is together, it's pretty much got no bulk at all, and it will mold itself to whatever the gap is. That's called EMV seal, I think, on the EcoMaster site. And on other sites, you might be able to just call it, if you looked up V seal, I think you'd probably get it. And that's suitable for a whole range of windows and doors, actually. An even better seal for the perimeter of a door and for a lot of windows as well is a timber seal with a compression strip or a brush pile seal. And depending where you get it, they're sometimes called draft dodgers, they're sometimes called timber compression seals. They're used for a whole range of things. This is what they look like. And you can get them also primed, so they're white, and that way you can paint them to whatever colour your door or window is. The way they go is in the frame of the door or window, and then the door or window closes onto them. So they're different than the other ones because they're not going in the gap between the frame and where the door closes. They're actually outside of that. One reason why these can be fantastic is because sometimes when houses move, and sometimes your door might, it might sink so that there's you can actually see a gap through the door and the window frame. The window frame isn't, the door is too low to even meet onto the window frame. A seal like this will extend the frame of the door or window so that it fills that gap as well as making a seal. Now, this is the same sort of thing, but with this black stuff is more of a pile seal. So it's similar, but just a little bit different, and would be good, say, for sash windows, so they slide up and down it better. Then you've got other types of doors, like French doors. There's a particular seal that goes in the middle of French doors. If anyone has them, you might notice there's seals for other things, but it's hard to get one that goes in that middle bit. And this one's called an astragal seal. It just fits down the middle, and it makes a really good draft proofing fix. Then there's this kind of window, the shug window. If anyone has them, they're not hugely common, but they're reasonably, I see them from time to time. They're 2 panels and they have a seal across the middle, but the seal often comes off or wears out, but you can buy replacements. And look, there's probably another 10 different kinds of doors and windows that you could mention, but what I'd really suggest is go to the EcoMaster site and just have a look and try and identify what it is you're trying to do. Let's have a look at some other drafts that are, in my view, a lot easier to handle. So open chimneys, that, like you said, like you saw on that chart, they are a really massive problem and you really need to seal them. It doesn't mean that you can't use the open fire anymore. You can put in a removable one and just take it out when you want to use a fire. But I often see that people have an open fire that they want to use now and then for the ambience, but they don't actually use it for everyday heating. So you've got a bunch of options. Remember that draft sealing is just physically blocking a gap. So you can do it with anything. I've seen people put cushions and all sorts of things up their chimneys and they will seal the gap. The only thing is, well, there's a few things. One is the possibility that someone lights a fire and you don't really want to put something up there that is going to then start, putting out all this horrible, noxious smoke. The other thing is just making sure people know that there's a block in there. So if you go away on holiday and someone house sits your house, they don't suddenly decide to light a fire and cause a big problem. But you can work out for yourself, like if it's just your house and it's always you there, then sure, I've seen the cushions work perfectly well. You can also buy proper ones. By proper, I just mean they're designed for it. From EcoMaster, they're foam chimney seals. You can also buy a chimney sheep, which is felt in a certain size. You need to get the size that fits your chimney. But probably, I think, if I had a chimney, I would probably be watching this video, which is Cal from Effie, who lives in Geelong, and he's a professional draft sealer. And he just shows you how to buy the fire-resistant, high-density foam and cut it to size and put it in yourself. He does professional draft sealing, and that's what he would do if he did it for you professionally, but he's showing you how to do it as well. So, the other thing is, if you're never going to use it again, it's also worth sealing it from the top, because they are such a massive pool of air that it's important to seal both sides if you can. Also, you don't want things falling in there. So usually a chimney sweep, if you've got any chimney sweeps in the area, will do that job and seal them from the top. There are lots and lots of drafts that you can simply fill with filler rod and cork. I might have, if any of you were at the in-person session, you will have seen probably a little tube of filler rod. It's this stuff. It's just foam, and it comes in a packet with a whole roll of it, really cheap. And why you use that is when the gap is more than 5 millimeters, you can't use this cork on top of it to fill the gap, and unless you've got something in there for the cork to then sit on, so to speak. So first of all, work out where your gaps are. If they're really small, less than 5 mil, you can just get a water-based cork and put it in the gap. We usually suggest one called Fuller's Fuller Seal, I think, or Fuller's Ultra Clear. It's a water-based cork. So sometimes frequently people talk about siliconing up gaps, and really you only want to use silicone if there's a water application that you need it to be waterproof. Otherwise, just use a water-based one. It's a lot easier to clean up, for example. So some of the gaps you just use the cork, others you put this in first, get the one that fits the gap, and then put the cork over the top. These are the kinds of things that you would fill like that. The really common one, if you've got a 70s house or 60s or 80s, is those wall vents. You can see it goes straight outside, lots and lots of airflow. So that's a good one for that. Under door frames is, I don't know why, but there's always a gap under there, and that can be leading into the wall cavity. It's worth filling up. Skirting gaps on the top or underneath. This one has a piece of timber across it to stop any gaps at the bottom, but especially if you've taken up carpet, you'll always end up with a bit of a gap. And if there's a gap, you pretty much got to assume that it's a problem. It might not always be, but with gaps, the professional draft sealers have said to me before, you just assume that it's a problem and fill it up. This is another instance where a house is moved and there's just gaps. This picture here, I should actually move it from this page because it's a bit of a different gap. It's called a ceiling vent, and it's from the same vintage as the wall vents. It's designed for passive ventilation, and often you'll find them above showers or laundries or sinks in older houses. Now, those ones would be tricky to fill up from below because the gap is big and it would just be tricky to make it look neat, I think. Generally, what we say if you have those is to lay something over it in the ceiling, like a piece of timber or even plastic, and then just insulate over the top of it. Because really you just want to stop the air going through there and into the ceiling and air coming back. Then there's all sorts of other gaps and cracks. So we're still with the filler rod and the caulking gun. This is I seem to recall this was a house, this was quite new, and this had been built on, but just not finished off at all. It's common that when you have different building materials that meet, like bricks onto plaster or bricks onto wood or wood onto bricks, that's where you get gaps, and those should all be filled as well because that's going into the wall space, the wall cavity, which might be uninsulated. Also around doors and window frames, it's often they're sealed at the sides, but sometimes not at the top and bottom because they're less visible. So builders, if they're trying to cut a corner, they do the sides and don't do the others. So they're worth doing. This was a brand new double glazed window someone had put in, and as you can see, they just haven't done a very good job. That shouldn't ever happen, but if it did, you could also fill that with a bit of caulking gun. This is a really, really common problem, which is floor vents for ducted heating. This one looks like an old gas ducted heating system. And the way they put the floor vents in is they cut a hole and they put the floor boot in, but they often or almost never seal up the gaps that are around that. So if you do have floor vents, take the top off, have a look, and it's not unusual that you'll be able to see the ground, like the gravel underneath the house through that gap. So that's a really good one to fix up. Even in a brand new house, These are the types of gaps that you're going to get there, which is when things get installed and tradespeople just don't take a great amount of care with filling the hole that they've made. This sort of hole might seem small, but in this situation, that was leading into a ceiling cavity because it was a second floor room, which means there's going to be really hot and dusty air coming through there all the time, and also you're losing air through there. Box air conditioners are very leaky. This particular one had a gap at all four sides, but that could quite easily be filled up as well. This is probably a flue or something. That's in some ways that's a little bit more tricky because if it is a flue from a heater, it might be hot, so you couldn't necessarily just put in the standard cork, but you might be able to find something else. And this is what's commonly at the back of an air conditioner, a reverse cycle air conditioner. What you would hope for is that the installer would just make a small hole that's big enough to fit those cables, because that's all they really need. But if they're not very good, or if they're not being very careful, they sometimes cut a really big hole and then don't fill it up. So unfortunately, that's the kind of one that's hard to sort out afterwards, because the air conditioner is usually in front of it. But at least if you know it's there, then you can be aware that if you've got someone servicing it or whatever, or you might be able to reach that gap from the other side. It's better to know they're there than not know they're there, I think. Now, this is another reverse cycle air conditioner installation where they've put the pipes through there, and I'm even if this was covered, there would still be a big hole. It would reduce, if they had put the rest of that cover on there, it would reduce the amount of airflow. But even up here, there's airflow. So it's, yeah, I don't actually quite know what to suggest for that, except just keep an eye on your tradespeople when they come and do things and make sure that doesn't happen. You can do sealing with tapes or plaster or foam, expanding foam. So you can do things after the fact. It's much better if the tradies do it then and there, because they've got the materials to do it, and that way you never have a problem in the first place. Unsealed exhaust fans are a really, really common one. From below, we can't really see that they're a big hole in the plaster because they've got the white mesh and it looks quite neat. But if you look from above, this is what you'll see. It's just a big hole in the plaster. Luckily, there's an easy way to fix that if it's an unsealed one, which is to put on one of these things. It's called a draft stopper cover, and it's not electrical or anything. It just sits over the fan and it's got flaps on the top. When the fan goes on, the flaps get pushed open by pressure, and when the fan goes off, they just fall closed. So their job is to stop the air constantly moving in and out while the fan's not in use, but they won't stop your fan working. So they're a really good one. They're actually available free under the Victorian Energy Upgrade Scheme, so you can get people to come and put them in for you. The only exception is when you've got a heat lamp combined with an exhaust fan. Those ones can't be covered because they generate a high level of heat, and if you put that over it, it would melt. So when you've got those, that's when we go back to that idea of zoning out the area. And I recommend that all the time. Like this week, I had someone who had a standard exhaust fan and a heat lamp exhaust fan in a bathroom, and they could have sealed the standard one, but not the other one. So I ended up just suggesting to draft seal the door to the room and keep the door closed as much as possible. A few more drafts that are especially in older houses. This is actually our original toilet window. It was a permanently open louver window, and that's not uncommon. With that, remember, if you always go back to that idea that all you need to do is physically block the gap. So there's a whole range of ways you could do it. You could get some old core flute from an election sign or something, cut it and put it in there. You're going to be blocking your light. So another option is to get clear acrylic and cut it to size and stick it over there. Obviously, you're blocking your ventilation then. So you want to also be taking account of, is there an exhaust fan in this room and do I need one? If it's just a toilet, that's not so important. I mean, it may be important or may not be depending on you, but if it's a bathroom, you definitely do need ventilation. You could also just put, cut a piece of plywood if you wanted to, if you didn't need the light and you wanted to get rid of that draft. This is also really common in older houses, is the vent, the mesh vent at the top of a window. And I saw this recently in a house I did an assessment for, which I just thought was such a neat way around it. They've cut some plywood, painted it the colour of the window frame and stuck it in. Or they probably stuck it in first and then painted it. But I think that's perfect. If obviously a nicer way might be to replace the whole window, but they have perfectly well sealed that gap. So, they've done the job. If you've got an old style vented skylight, what I mean by that is one that is quite a large hole, and it may have a cover on the bottom, but often it won't be sealed at all. It's just a sort of grid. That was our original skylight, and it was very drafty. They were designed to be drafty. They actually had vents all the way around the top. But we don't want that anymore. We want to be able to control the amount of air coming through. So a professional draft sealer like Cal and the others that are in Melbourne, they will cut this stuff to size. It's called Sun Tough. It's a cellular clear acrylic. And you can buy it by the sheet, cut it to size, and then attach it in the bottom part of your skylight with some timber beading. Or you might, I think this one, for example, it already has a sort of a timber thing there that this mesh thing rested on. So you could cut it to size and rest it on the same framework. So the benefit of that is, first of all, it's separating the room from that big shaft of air, which is connected to the ceiling space. So there's a lot of heat moving in and out. Also, you're stopping the draft from the vents at the top, but you're still getting light. So that's probably the simplest way of dealing with that sort of thing. Evaporative cooler vents, if you do have an evaporative cooler, they're drafty, whereas the other ducted heating and cooling systems aren't. The reason others aren't is because they're designed to be enclosed systems, and the air just goes from the gas heater through the ducts into the house, back to the gas heater, and so on. So it doesn't actually leave the house, whereas an evaporative cooler, I'm just going to skip for a sec, an evaporative cooler is designed that fresh air comes in through that unit, in through the house, and then out through doors and windows. It's a one-way system. What that means is in the winter, if you haven't got a heater on, that same one way goes the opposite way, so you lose a lot of heat. And if you do have the heater on, you're losing your heat as well. So that's why they're different. You can get covers, these type of covers, free under the Victorian Energy Upgrade Scheme. But you can also make your own. It sort of depends, I guess, on whether you're keeping that system. If you are, then it's handy to have something that's easy to remove. But other people that I've seen still remove them in summer when they want to use their evaporative cooler, but they've cut their own plywood. Some of them paint it, some of them use other materials. This one's a cover that's got magnetic tape around the edges. So they've first added magnetic tape to the edges of the vent, and then they stick this thing on, which also has magnetic tape. So then that becomes a seal. So there's a range of ways you can do it. One thing I'll just mention is if you're going to try and make your own, these little plastic slats, they do get quite brittle and they can break. So just take take real care if you're trying to take them out and put them back in at the end of each year. I guess that's why something like this might be easier, because you're not actually trying to touch them. Disused ducted heating vents, we already talked about those gaps in the sides. I don't know if you can see that, but you can see gravel under the house through that one. So generally, there's two things. If you're going to keep your gas ducted system, then all you do is seal those edges. But if you're going to decommission it, usually it's, unless you're going to change your flooring or your carpet or your timber, it's really hard to make it look as though they weren't there. So most people will just stuff some insulation in them and put the cover back on. You can get more fancy covers at EcoMaster where you can get, specially cut to size to fit in there, but it's not necessary. And this is another option that someone's done, where they've cut a piece of timber to size and inserted it and painted it, and then they're putting the cover back on. So really, all you need to do is block the gaps, and the rest of it is aesthetic choices of how you want it to look in the end. Just in case you don't know what's under there, this is sort of what it looks like that's under your house. This would be the bit that comes in through the floorboards or through the ground or the floor. And then this is the floor boot, and that's where the duct would be connected. So most of the time you would leave that there. You might cable tie the duct over here just for an added, making sure nothing's getting in there and nesting in your nice insulation. Okay, recessed downlights are, it used to be that the biggest problem with these was the halogen globes, because they used so much energy. And when these first became a thing, they all used halogen globes. But we've really gotten on top of that now, and I very rarely see halogen globes anymore. But the trouble is that they actually have three issues. One was the halogen globes, and the energy use, so that's not a problem. But there's two more. One is the draught, and one is that you need holes in the insulation around the lights. So at the moment, we're just talking about the draughts. Actually, I'll mention the holes in the insulation too, though. So the biggest issues with draughts, you can see the draught around the edge. The biggest issue is when they're what's called gimbaled. That means they can move direction. Or if they're these ones that have a particularly big opening, they're a recessed downlight, but they're bigger than all of the standard ones. And they're really drafty because there's a big gap in the middle there. You can probably see a bit of a gap there as well. So the easiest way around this is to change, actually, one way to do it is, if you don't particularly care whether you have downlights, you could just get rid of them and replaster the holes in the ceiling and put in regular lighting. And that's actually becoming more and more common for people to do. But if you do still want them, what you do is you upgrade them to what's called an IC4 rated downlight. They need this symbol on them, which will either be there or on a sticker on the cord. And what that IC4 rating means is that they're safe to have insulation around them, but also from the bottom, they're completely sealed and they're LED, so they're low energy. So you fixed all three issues all in one go. The other option is that you can instead install one of these fire-rated downlight covers over each one. And that will also prevent the draughts because it's sealed, and you can insulate right up to around that downlight cover as well. So that's another option. Now, if you're going to pay someone to upgrade your recessed downlights, then it depends on the electrician, but I know I've spoken to a few and they've said a typical cost is about $50 to install and supply one of these and create a plug, because each one needs its own plug. So that's about $50. These are $25 each, these downlight covers. So you can work out for yourself what the best way to attempt that is. The reason I've included this one is because it can be a really significant draft. It's inside the ducted heating return. I think most people probably don't look in them because why would you really? If you haven't seen one, it's a mesh thing on the wall. And if you've got a ducted heating or cooling system, the air that has that needs reheating or recooling will go back through that vent into this tube and then back into the system to be heated or cooled. But what can happen is, if the installers haven't done a very good job, is these are not encased in anything. So this was a house I went to and they'd just bought it and they said, look, I think maybe the previous owners put it in themselves. And you can see that this vent, the return air vent, is just sitting in a hole in the floor, and this is the ground underneath. You could see it on all four sides. So that is a terrible, terrible draft into the house. And when it's trying to get air to go back into the unit, it's probably going to get it from under the house before it gets it from in the house. So that's also not working very well. This is the same kind of thing, but in a roof system. So when you open that thing and stick your head up and look upwards, this one was a hole cut in the ceiling plaster and that duct was just hanging there. Both of them should be mounted in something like this, and that seals the gap, but it means that the duct has somewhere, so the air just goes straight through the duct rather than around the sides. So that's really worth looking at. I want to make a special note of draft sealing in relation to the safety of the air we're breathing. The rental standards are actually that you are not allowed to draft seal a room that has an open fluid heater. And I think it's a good rule of thumb for everybody. We, as assessors or even draft sealers, they won't draft seal a room that has a gas space heater or a space wood heater in it, because you just don't know what sort of things might be coming into the air, what sort of combustion products. The difference between the two is if you've got a room sealed heater, that's this one, it's designed so that it's getting its air to burn from outside, and then it's burning and all the combustion products are going outside. So it's actually completely sealed from the inside room. You're getting the heat, but you're not getting any air. Whereas an open fluid one, it actually uses air from the room to burn, and then theoretically the heat comes out and you get warm and the combustion products go up there. But it doesn't take much to upset that balance. So if you haven't had your wood chimney cleaned, for example, it might be dirty and then the combustion products end up going into the room. Or say if it's a heater and you install a really high powered range hood and exhaust fan and you have them on, they can cause a situation where there's more pressure pulling out than there is going up there. So that's why we don't seal those places. And it's worth, if you do have them, well, I've got some information from Energy Safe Victoria. It's worth, with a gas appliance, servicing it every 2 years at least to check for carbon monoxide, even if they're new. Don't leave it running overnight just because of the long periods of time that things might be happening in, and installing a carbon monoxide alarm as a backup. So this is sort of related because it's about air quality, but it's really common for people to say, if we seal up all these things, what's going to happen? Like, aren't we going to end up with moisture everywhere? And you may, if you don't equally think about the need for ventilation, because we really do need both. Both drafts and ventilation are about the movement of air, but drafts are when we can't control it, and so it's not working to our advantage, whereas ventilation is definitely required, but we can control when we do it. So we use it on purpose when we're generating moisture. Excuse me, for example. Or, if the house has been locked up for a couple of days because it's been raining, you might open all the doors just to let that stale air out and get a bit of fresh air in. Just the very fact of living creates water vapor in the house. Breathing, our pets breathing, cooking, dishwashing, clothes washing, there's all sorts of things we do that create moisture in the house. So part of what you want to do is know where you're creating moisture and then reduce it as much as you can. Some things you can't reduce, but for example, drying clothes inside, this says 5 kilograms of water per day if you dry clothes inside. So if you go from a drafty house to a not drafty house, you just can't dry clothes inside anymore, with one exception, which I'll talk about in a minute. You need to get in good habits. So when you are generating moisture, that you use exhaust fans and range hoods. And if you need to, use a dehumidifier and get a humidity sensor. I'm trying to remember if I showed this at the in-person session. If I didn't, you can buy a humidity sensor like this fairly cheap, and they have this face that is either happy or sad or, sort of in the middle. And what that's doing is it's reading the humidity in a room and telling you when it's a good level. So this is the optimal zone of humidity you want to aim for, is between 40 and 60. I'm trying to think, is it 40 to 60% relative humidity? That's what it is. So that's the healthiest. When we get less than that or more than that, that's when we start creating conditions where things grow that aren't very good for us to breathe in. And that's when mold grows and that sort of thing. So getting a humidity sensor is really handy. These, you can literally just walk to different rooms of the house and it will immediately show you the change in humidity. So you don't need one for every room. You can just, move it around now and then to see what's going on. And if you do need a bit of help with dehumidifying, a dehumidifier is I think it's a good investment if you've got problems with humidity in the house. This one is one that's frequently talked about in sort of assessing circles, just because it's a good quality one and it draws a lot of water out of the air. It's a desiccant humidifier and you can remove up to 10 litres of moisture out of the air per day. So what we're just talking about my own experience. We're in a 70s house, as you may have heard, and it was extremely drafty and then went to being not drafty, but we still had some old habits of, we just weren't used to not having a drafty house. So while we got used to that, we were like, okay, we're actually getting more humidity now than we're used to. So we ended up getting a dehumidifier, and we found that if we ran it in a room for a couple of days, for example, while we were out, we'd get all this moisture out of the air, and then that room would stay less humid for quite a long time. It's almost as if the moisture has gone into the furnishings and things. So that's one way you can use it, is just gradually move it around the house and dehumidify different areas. The other really handy thing about it is we don't have a clothes dryer, and we usually just hang everything outside. But what we've discovered is if we put a rack in the bathroom and we put the dehumidifier on overnight, it will dry a whole load of clothes overnight. And then we just tip the water out in the morning. So it's sort of dual purpose. Especially in winter when you have those periods where it just won't stop raining and things don't get quite dry outside. It's a really good way to finish them off. Another thing then, well, ongoing, I suppose, is just to try and prevent new drafts from being introduced, because you might have dealt with all of the drafts in your house, and then you get tradies coming in and doing things, and they just bring in a whole lot of new drafts. So this is where it's good to get companies that have good what's the word? They take their work seriously. They're trying to not leave you with a problem that you didn't have in the first place. So just, be aware of what they may or may not do. In terms of what to do next, the first thing I think would be worth doing is going back to that one of those earlier pictures that had all of the places you can have a draft in the house, and figure out where they are in your home. And also maybe look at the chart showing the difference in the impact and work out which ones are the biggest impact, because they're the ones you're going to try and seal the first if you can. Then work out, are you going to do it yourself? Some of them I'm sure you'll be able to do yourself. Others might be a little bit trickier. But there are great YouTube videos on a whole bunch of drafts showing you what to do. So work out whether you're going to do them yourself or hire a professional. Even the average handy person can probably do some of them, especially things like replastering gaps. And then just enjoy the results. When we first started doing things to our house, one of the very first jobs we did is we went around and we filled in the 2 wall vents in every room, which seems like a really small thing to do, but we noticed the difference in our comfort and the feel of the house, and we were absolutely shocked that just that tiny thing could make such a difference. So you really will notice it. And even if this is the only thing you get to, or this and a couple of other low-cost things, it might be all you need to make a big difference to your comfort. So just a couple of other resources. The Your Home Manual, Sustainability Victoria are both fantastic resources with lots of information on them and downloadable information. And also Renew, which is a not-for-profit organisation that has a lot of articles about different things and examples of how people have done things. That would be a good place actually for draft sealing information. Corangamite Shire, there's a page with information, and by all means contact Prue for information and help about things that are matter to you. Also, I had a look on your libraries, and that's what they're called, home energy kits in your libraries. And this was from just like an hour ago. So the one in Camperdown is currently booked, and then Carolyn, you're getting it as soon as it's... Oh, you're on mute, sorry. Oh, you're still on mute. That's okay, but...
I'm getting the one from Terrain.
Oh, okay. All right. So then it'll be booked, but there's still 2 more. So honestly, go, put your name down and get one. They're fun to play with. And they've got one of those thermal imaging cameras. That's that thing. They've got one of them, and they're good to go around the house and have a play with. That's it for me. I actually don't know how long I've talked for, so hopefully I'm within time. Has anyone got any questions? Feel free to, actually, what I'll do, I'll stop sharing and then I'll be able to see the chat as well. Yes, Kathy, I thought you were here. Oh, you were in person and the last online. You're a regular. Okay.
Yes, and Jen, I've just done that closing of the vents, the 2 vents in each wall.
Yeah.
I did that on Sunday after our chat on Saturday, and yes, I do notice a slight difference.
Isn't that incredible?
It is. So I think there was a lot of heat hanging out inside the walls, but not inside the room.
Yeah. I'm really pleased to hear that. Yeah, I think that was one of the things that I learned when we had one done of our house that made me so enthused to get into this field, because I just couldn't believe what a difference it made and how simple it was.
Well,
Simple and cheap.
mine were easy because mine were the plastic vents, and you just turn a little thing in the middle and they clip off.
Amazing.
And I thought, what am I going to put over them?
Yeah.
So I ran a couple of sheets through my laminator and cut them to size and taped them on the inside.
Yep.
So they're nice and clear. There's no yucky colour sticking out through through the gaps in the vent. But
Well
yeah, no,
done.
it's
That's
so
great.
I reckon it's made a difference of at least a couple of degrees.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah.
It is.
Yep. Doesn't take much.
No, not at all.
Yeah. Has anyone got any questions about strange things they've seen in their own homes or things you're not sure about whether they're an issue? How about you, Prue?
Well, the weirdest thing that I had at my place, which I think that I've draft proofed it, but I don't really know, is the window that's like the two panels like this.
Yeah.
And yeah, so there's just like the permanent gap in it, and I don't think that there was ever a seal thing in it. So anyhow, I've just put some towels down there.
Yeah.
And and it seems to be so much better because it's in both, like the toilet and the bathroom are separate. So it was in both the toilet and the bathroom. And yeah, it seems to have made a big difference. I feel like it's still drafty, but yeah, better than it was. So,
is that one of those ones where they've built it so there's a gap between?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
that's a great idea,
yeah.
putting a towel in there.
Yeah.
Yep. Because there's quite a big gap, isn't it?
Yeah,
usually?
it is. It's quite big, and yeah. So anyhow, I think it's going well. We'll see we'll see. I feel like I need to get the thermal camera and stuff once everyone else is at a turn, and then borrow the thermal camera and see what's happening, and hopefully it'll be all right. Yeah. But yeah, I think I think that my biggest concern at my place is more just because I'm a renter about what can I actually do and what's like what's within my limits and what's not. But yeah, so I need to talk to the real estate about a few things because I've noticed a few things that I could do, but I just want to check with them to make sure that they're happy that I can do it.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
And what I know about the rental standards is that you have to ask permission, but they can't really say no when it's about draft sealing, and they would have to have a very good reason to say that you can't do it. So yeah, as long as you just run it by them and say, this is what I'm planning to do, there's not much they can do to stop it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then when the new rental standards come in, they're going to have to have done all the draft sealing before you move in, which is going to be great for renters.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I also think that I need to get a few door snakes because I have carpet in the living area. Well, yeah, carpet basically everywhere except for the kitchen and the bathrooms. And so it's putting the door seals on is a bit difficult. So I think that a door snake is probably what I'm going to have to get, even though I was hoping that maybe there'd be another solution. But I mean, it doesn't really matter, especially for the doors that I don't use very often. I don't like it's fine just to put one
for
there.
those it's easy. When they're sort of annoying when you do use them a lot because every time you move it you've got to bend down. What about that one that was the roller one? Is that an option?
I was potentially thinking, I think potentially for the front door it would work. But then I think I need to look into it a bit more. to see how it works and and then if I can do it being a renter. Which I think that I would be able to, but
I think
just to check.
Yeah. Good on you. Well, if no one else has got any questions, as we've said before, if anyone comes up with any questions, just let Prue know. She can ask me. We'll, share the answers. I'll be sending a copy of the slides, and Prue's still probably got all the other bits and pieces that we had from last time she can send on as well. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's been another really good evening. Like it's been really helpful.
Good.
I've written down little things that I know that I can, do and look up and I did the other night. So yeah, it's great.
And then if you can come tomorrow, is it tomorrow? It is tomorrow,
Yeah.
the windows. You might even have more ideas.
I say I will.
All right. Well, I'll see you then.
Okay. Thank
All
you.
right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.